The unknown regions are the most mysterious part of the Star Wars galaxy. Some of the most unusual and feared alien species hail from this massive expanse of space. This is also the biggest area of the galaxy, which proves how enormous it really is. But why is it so unknown in a mythos with intrepid explorers and hyperspace travel? In this video, I'm going to look at the 5 main reasons why the unknown regions remain so isolated in both canon and legends. We're going to look at everything from the practical hazards of space travel to the Emperor's secret ambitions. Let's get started. The most obvious reason why the unknown regions are unknown is that they're incredibly dangerous. Many sources in canon and legends consistently explain that the region contains many extreme navigational hazards that make it almost impossible to travel safely. Space travelers depend on hyperspace lanes to traverse long distances across the galaxy. These are essentially the universe's charted highways that ensure safe connectivity between worlds and systems. Hyperspace lanes protect ships from colliding with planets and other celestial bodies like asteroids, black holes, and stars. Star Wars: Battles That Changed the Galaxy tells us that in the early days of deep space travel, explorers depended on hyperspace beacons to make safe jumps. Ships were too primitive at the time to have onboard navigational computers that calculated the most efficient route to their destination. These hyperspace beacons were located at the end of hyperspace lanes and also served as refueling points. Some still exist during the Imperial era, as we see in the Star Wars comic book series, although they're mostly obsolete. In later Star Wars, every hyperspace-capable ship has a navigation computer as standard. But even this technology can take several minutes to chart the most appropriate route. This is why fleeing ships can't just instantly jump to hyperspace if a pursuer attacks them. Pilots usually don't perform blind jumps to hyperspace because it's almost certainly going to be suicidal. In Timothy Zahn's Legends novel Outbound Flight, George Cardass is a junior crew member on the smuggler's ship, the Bargain Hunter. As they flee the vengeful Praga the Hutt, Cardass makes a split-second decision to perform a blind jump to light speed. This drops the Bargain Hunter in an uncharted area of the unknown regions. His boss, Captain Rack Quinto, is furious with him, even though Cardass didn't really have much choice. But Quinto's anger is totally justifiable because 99% of the time this wouldn't work. First, they must survive the risk of smashing into a space rock and exploding into a million pieces. But in the unknown regions, there's another big danger. Because this is uncharted space, travelers will likely be lost forever if they don't know where they're going. There's no way out at sublight speeds because the distances are too far and unknown. Pilots can only escape by making another blind hyperspace jump. What are the chances of surviving this again? Han Solo famously said, "Never tell me the odds." But even he might think twice about doing this in the unknown regions. In Solo, a Star Wars story, Han almost performs a blind jump through the Maw in the Kessel system. This is a much smaller and more contained area of space than the unknown regions, but it still contains many of the same obstacles. Black holes, gravity wells, and stellar debris made this ludicrously dangerous, but the young smuggler did it in an act of sheer desperation. Even so, he still had some sensor charts as well as L337's data charts. In Episode 4, Han himself warns Luke about the importance of performing precise calculations. He says without them, they could fly right through a star or bounce too close to a supernova. This was very much a case of don't do as I do as I say, because Han performs the only true on-screen blind hyperspace jump in The Force Awakens. He makes an emergency jump from the hold of a freighter as he desperately tries to escape the Kanji Club, gang, and a ferocious Rather Beast. The jump works, but he almost crashes the Falcon into a planet. Han smashes his beloved ship through trees as he struggles to pull up, clearly demonstrating the massive risk he took. The lack of charted hyperspace lanes makes it way too dangerous to explore the unknown regions properly. But why didn't early galactic spacefarers do it? After all, the rest of the galaxy didn't have charted hyperspace lanes either until intrepid explorers and later the Old Republic set about documenting them. A key reason for this is that most of the developed galaxy emerged from the core worlds like Coruscant, Corellia, and Duro, after the fall of the Rakatan Infinite Empire. Humans, Duros, and Hutts were the first species to develop hyperspace technology that didn't depend on the Force. The novel Tarkin reveals that after the establishment of the Republic, the core worlds became incredibly wealthy but also overpopulated, so they began to colonize outer systems. That's why, as a general rule, the further we go from the core, the more dangerous the galaxy becomes. Meanwhile, the Republic and later the Empire didn't ever have full authority over the entire known galaxy. For example, the Hutts controlled a significant chunk of space, with the Republic even negotiating with the Crime Lords to use their hyperspace lanes during the Clone Wars. It took 25,000 years to chart the known galaxy, so let's give them some credit. The unknown regions were just too far from the core and too dangerous to map. According to Chuck Wendig's canon novel, Aftermath: Empire's End, it takes literal weeks to reach the edge of the unknown regions from the core, and that's without actually entering it properly. Exploring the unknown regions is another story completely because it's almost impossible to find anywhere without specific secret charts. The Chiss Ascendancy novels show that travel typically happens in slow, considered stages. Meanwhile, the sequel trilogy reveals that it's almost impossible to find the Sith world of Exegol in the unknown regions without Palpatine's secret charts or the Force. Wait, I sense a disturbance in the Force, and I know what you can do to remedy it. Why won't you stop by the sponsor of today's video, War Thunder? At War Thunder, you can choose from over 2,500 different vehicles and make them fight. It's literally the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made, and is available for free on PC, consoles, and even on your mobile devices. They've got everything from tanks, planes, battleships, a whole arsenal. War Thunder has a massive player base of 95 million gamers who duke it out in PvP battles. And the best part? I can help you out with my special offer. Use the links in the pinned comment or video description to sign up. New players and players who haven't played in 6 months will receive a massive bonus pack on PC and consoles. That includes multiple premium vehicles, the exclusive vehicle decorator Eagle of Valor, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium account. Available for a limited time only, so stop by War Thunder. Let's talk a little about black holes and gravity wells because they're two of the biggest threats in the unknown regions, apart from physical space debris and stars. I'm no astronomer, but the short explanation for black holes is that they're the result of a large star experiencing a supernova and collapsing. Basically, the danger is that they'll suck in and destroy anything that flies too close to them. Meanwhile, gravity wells are the pull of gravity around a large body in space. Gravity wells are incredibly dangerous because they interact with hyperspace itself. Flying too close to a gravity well can cause catastrophic misjumps or even tear a ship apart if it tries to force a jump to hyperspace. Imperial interdictor cruisers artificially create gravity wells in canon and legends, as we've seen in the Star Wars Rebels series. Fascinatingly, the Prodori civilization during the High Republic had super durable ships that could withstand the pressures of gravity wells, as Aftermath Life Debt proves. However, the unknown regions have a disproportionate number of black holes, gravity wells, and supernovas because they're just a naturally tumultuous and uneven area of the galaxy. Even the Chiss, one of the few known advanced species that live in the unknown regions, philosophically refer to it as the chaos. This isn't a criticism, but just an acceptance of its literal state. Money makes the world go round. This is another key factor in why the unknown regions remain mostly unexplored and unclaimed in Star Wars. They're simply too far away from the rest of the galaxy to be worth the risk of sanctioning expeditions. Before we delve too deep into this topic, I should make it clear that we're looking at this from a very core-centric perspective. I already said that the core is the political and economic center of the legitimate developed galaxy. Coruscant was the center of galactic governments for millennia. The novel Aftermath explains that Chandrila, Mon Mothma's homeworld, is credited with establishing democracy. Several of the galaxy's most powerful shipyards, including Corellia and Quad Drive yards, are also in the core. It's the conduit around which the rest of the explored galaxy revolves. Major economic players like the Mining Guild and the Tag Corporation worked with the Republic and the Empire. The Clone Wars series proves that many of these huge industrial giants focused on intensive resource extraction from isolated worlds. But these contracts were also massively expensive, so they needed the guarantee that they'd profit from it. Ventures into the unknown regions were too risky because there was no certainty that they'd survive, never mind find anything profitable. There were enough charted planets in the galaxy already without trying to find more. Thanks to Star Wars' Build the Millennium Falcon, we know that the corporate sector authority had thousands of systems under its sway by the time of the Clone Wars. Comprised of many ruthless corporations, they definitely would have raced to the unknown regions if they knew that there was something worth extracting. It's a similar story with the Hutts, whose culture favored accumulating raw profits and influence over expansion just for the sake of getting extra territory. The reason they don't explore the unknown regions is simply that they can't, and it's not worthwhile. We know that the Empire did foray into the unknown regions, and I'll discuss that in depth later. For now, it's enough to say that the Emperor sent probe droids at various points, including during the Empire Strikes Back, during the search for the Rebel base. But why didn't the greedy corporations also send probes into the unknown regions? The simple reason is that it was very ineffective. The distances were too great, and it was almost impossible to maintain contact with them due to the region's innumerable anomalies. It was very likely that they would be destroyed, so it was a pointless exercise. In Legends, we get one of the most infamous and tragic forays into the unknown regions. Outbound Flight by Timothy Zahn tells us about the ill-fated expedition beyond the unknown galaxy. The broad aim of Outbound Flight is to chart the unknown regions and to potentially settle in a habitable system, or even cross into another galaxy. The Jedi also feel that the Force is uncannily different and fear that there is an undiscovered threat hiding in the unknown regions, which they hope to expose. In Legends, this eventually emerges as the terrifying Yuuzhan Vong. The Republic government is reluctant to approve the mission because it would be insanely expensive, and they think they're just throwing credits into a black hole. It's the Jedi Order, under pressure from Master Joruus C'baoth, that ultimately succeeds in getting it sanctioned. Crucially, the Republic didn't want to get any bad press if it got destroyed, as they inevitably thought it would. Instead, the Jedi would absorb the loss. Outbound Flight is a self-sustaining megastructure comprised of 6 Dreadnought-class heavy cruisers arranged around a central core that includes agricultural sections, water processing, and many more areas. Throughout their journey, Outbound Flight proves exactly why nobody explores the unknown regions. The journey is incredibly difficult because dust clouds affect their sensors, there are dense asteroid clouds, and star systems are closer together than the galactic standard. Meanwhile, there are gravitational anomalies everywhere, and this forces frequent microjumps and constant recalculation. One person's tired error could doom the entire mission with no hope of rescue, even if they survive the initial failure. It's relentlessly exhausting and puts the entire crew under extreme stress, and that's with 6 Jedi Masters and 12 Jedi Knights on board. Remember, this is all before they even meet the locals. Outbound Flight isn't canon, but the overall representation of the unknown regions remains consistent and is one of the clearest that we have outside of the sequel trilogy. Another major issue with traveling through the unknown regions is that the locals aren't very welcoming either. Imagine surviving all those black holes and gravity wells just to run into the Vagari horde or the Sea-Rook. They're just some of the many nasty sentient species that made their home in the unknown regions. I'll focus on Legends for the most part here because that's where most of the lore comes from. It's no wonder the explored galaxy avoided this mostly uncharted chunk of space. The Sea-Rook emerged from the unknown region shortly after the Battle of Endor in the novel The Truce at Bakura. These Saurian aliens had a massive war fleet and an empire in a star cluster on the far side of the unknown regions. These ferocious dinosaur-like beings used technology called entekment that extracted life energy from living beings and channeled it as energy for their weapons and crafts. Humans were particularly susceptible to entekment and were the most common beings in the galaxy. Ultimately, the Sea-Rook's attempt to invade the known galaxy was stopped by an allied New Republic and Imperial remnant fleet. The Vagari are another species that would definitely have invaded the galaxy if they had the chance. In Outbound Flight, they're depicted as a horrifyingly ruthless nomadic culture that conquered and enslaved vulnerable planets. Vagari had a total lack of empathy and would abandon fallen comrades if they couldn't help themselves. But even worse was their exploitation of their slaves. They used living shields on their shields, comprised of sentient beings in transparasteel-like plastic bubbles. Usually, this caused their opponents to pause at least initially because they didn't want to kill vulnerable beings. The Vagari also used their slaves as shields during firefights, as we see with the poor Garoons in Outbound Flight. The Chiss Ascendancy ultimately curtails their ambitions of conquering all in their path. But they did become valuable allies to the Yuuzhan Vong, according to the unknown regions. The Vagari also exist in canon, with their first official appearance in the novel Chaos Rising. Many aspects remain consistent with their legacy depiction, including the horrifying living shields. However, the revamped Vagari are more like slaver pirates than a threatening empire. It's fair to say that most beings from the explored galaxy didn't fancy running into a violent alien culture and potentially alerting them to our existence. Their fear was justifiable because the unknown regions were a brutal place. It was better that aliens like the Vagari remained oblivious about the Republic or the Empire because it wouldn't end well. The galaxy didn't know it, but they had the Chiss to thank for preventing or limiting potentially devastating invasions. The Chiss Ascendancy is a fascinating civilization because it's far more rational and moderate than the cultures I previously mentioned. We know from the new Thrawn novels that the Chiss were an ancient aristocratic culture that embraced a policy of non-interventionism. Despite their isolationism, they were also avid explorers and researchers. Unlike the Vagari or the Siruk, the Chiss didn't embrace violence and banned preemptive fights. This is one of the central reasons why Thrawn leaves his people behind to join the Empire in Outbound flight. Most of the galaxy has no idea that the Chiss exist or assumes they're just a myth. They're one of the most technologically and socially advanced civilizations in the unknown regions, but only survive because they adapt to it. The Chiss have a powerful defense fleet and expansive intelligence networks. However, they're more than happy to remain a secret in the corner of their galaxy, and this protects them. They also have one massive advantage over other beings that gives them an almost unique ability to move through the unknown regions. I'm talking about Force-sensitive navigators. The unknown regions are unique in that the most effective way to travel through them is to use the Force for guidance. Obviously, very few people in the galaxy have this ability. There's a long history of Force-based navigation in Star Wars lore from the Rakatan Infinite Empire to the Jedi Order. Thousands of years before the Republic, the Rakata depended on living Force users to make hyperspace jumps. Their infinity gates were essentially massive portals powered entirely by the Force that linked distance-controlled worlds. Ultimately, they lost access to them when they succumbed to a mysterious plague that cut them off from the Force. This was because of their brutal enslavement of many worlds and species as they used their energy to power their living ships. The Knights of the Old Republic game established Lehon as their homeworld. This was deep on the far fringes of the unknown regions and almost impossible to reach without the Infinity Gates. This left the surviving Rakata isolated on their homeworld, cut off from their former empire. It also helped to establish the unknown regions as somewhere to fear, and with good reason. The fall of the Rakata resulted in the creation of artificial hyperdrive technology, arguably the most significant development in galactic history. Suddenly, humans, Duros, Devaronians, and Hutts were traveling across the galaxy and colonizing new worlds. It was a game changer because hyperdrive tech didn't require any special abilities. In fact, it was also seen as a safeguard because it removed one key advantage that Force users had over regular beings. Spacefarers were no longer dependent, which removed a massive power imbalance, but it also basically removed the option of traveling through the unknown regions because using the Force was the safest way to navigate its many tumultuous obstacles. That's why there were so many Jedi on the Outbound flight mission. One of their many mandates was to detect mass shadows not yet charted or encountered. They had the life-saving ability to alert navigators before a jump could be lethal. This also allowed them to coordinate the 6 massive dreadnoughts and reduce the risk of one of them suddenly dropping out of hyperspace. It was almost impossible to cross the unknown regions without them. Again, I need to say this isn't canon, but it's definitely consistent with what we know about the Jedi and travel in this section of the galaxy. The Chiss also had their own unique way of handling the precarious nature of travel through what they called the Chaos. They initially appeared in the Outbound flight novel, but have since made their way into canon in the Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy. The novels explain how the Chiss have unique Force users known as Auxilia, or Skywalkers. Yes, it's pretty easy to see the connection there, right? The Skywalker entered a trance-like state that allowed them to view hyperspace as shifting lights or paths. They can call out course corrections in real time, guiding ships with short hops instead of long jumps. The Chiss refer to this as third sight, but crucially don't frame it with the Force. Perhaps the most unusual detail about the Skywalkers is that they were all children who eventually lost this intimate connection with the Force. Throughout the Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy, we see how the Chiss protect their Skywalkers as strategic assets. It's no wonder because this is their only way to safely navigate the depths of the unknown regions, and it gives them a massive advantage over other beings in this area of the galaxy. However, the books also emphasize that there's a moral struggle amongst the Chiss because of how they're using children in this way, even if ultimately no physical harm is coming to them. Finally, we know that the Yuuzhan Vong had their own unique method of crossing the unknown regions in the New Jedi Order Legends novels. Their ships were guided by living organisms that could sense gravity and hyperspace distortions without using the Force. They used a combination of traveling at sublight speeds and short, cautious hops to traverse the unknown regions. Fascinatingly, their separation from the Force actually made the unknown regions less hostile to them. They took centuries of crossing it in their living ships as they built up their strength and consolidated their power. This also proves the narrative flexibility that the unknown regions allow. In the novel, Starfighters of Andumar, Wedge Antilles basically says that if we keep going to the unknown regions, we're going to have to find another name for it. He's not wrong, because despite the names, Star Wars lore has definitely filled in plenty of the blanks over the years. However, there's no doubt that the unknown regions are a valuable resource for writers, because anything could be in there, so it provides plenty of creative freedom. Let's wrap this video up by focusing on the Empire and the First Order's relationship to the unknown regions in Legends and canon. There are major deviances between the two storylines, but both are fascinating. We know from the new Disney movies how the Empire secretly built up its forces in the unknown regions after the Battle of Jakku. Chuck Wendig's novel Aftermath: Empire's End reveals how Palpatine planned for this eventuality. If the Empire collapsed, it must be totally destroyed and reborn. Only the strongest could survive and eventually replenish a new order. His vision involves sending the survivors into the unknown regions to rebuild in isolation and intensify their military radicalism. Gallius Rex was the architect of Palpatine's plan, but he depended on the Emperor's preparation. The Sith Lord personally charted routes into the unknown regions using Sith lore, ancient navigational data, and dark side lore. In short, he basically uses the Force to navigate his way through the most dangerous and unpredictable region in the galaxy. Ultimately, the surviving Imperial fleet under Admiral Ray Sloane used these charts to flee the Exegol and would never have reached the Sith world without them. Again, this gave the writers plenty of narrative flexibility, because the First Order could build up their massive fleet when the unknown regions, while the rest of the galaxy remained blissfully unaware. This is definitely one of the most polarizing aspects of the new canon, because many fans don't believe they could have created the infrastructure to create massive shipyards in the unknown regions, but I'll leave that to you to decide. The Legends storyline is extremely different but very compelling. Emperor Palpatine still secretly explored the unknown regions, sending Grand Admiral Thrawn into the depths of space. In Timothy Zahn's Outbound Flight and Survivor's Quest novels, we learn that Palpatine believed there was an impending threat from outside the galaxy. The Emperor considered the unknown regions a strategic blind spot that must be controlled and unveiled. He sensed the Yuuzhan Vong before their galactic invasion, and this drastically impacts his subsequent actions. The novels Vector Prime and Destiny's Way reframe Palpatine's authoritarian actions as preparatory, not simply tyrannical. His militarization of the galaxy was a preparation for a threat beyond anything that they had ever encountered before. This actually makes Palpatine a far more morally ambiguous character than gives his motivators more depth. It doesn't redeem him, but it shows how he was willing to become a monster to save the galaxy on his terms. In Cloak of Deception, we see his obsession with dark-side artifacts and ancient Sith ruins. Palpatine also didn't trust the Jedi, with his Sith affiliation instantly putting him in opposition to them. But even beyond this ideological hatred for the Jedi Order, he didn't believe that they would ever spot the Yuuzhan Vong's threat in time. Thrawn is Palpatine's most valuable asset in the unknown regions because of his direct experience of living within it and navigating across it. Even if the Old Republic did have an interest in exploring the unknown regions, they don't have an equivalent asset. Outbound Flight is the closest they get to this, but ultimately Palpatine sabotages the mission, killing everybody on board. Meanwhile, after the fall of the Empire, the New Republic is too focused on rebuilding the regular galaxy without adding the uncertainty of the unknown regions to the mix. That strategy worked fine until the Yuuzhan Vong emerged and destroyed half the galaxy. We shouldn't be too harsh on the Republic though, because it's almost impossible to prepare for something you've never experienced or have no reason to imagine. The Grisk have functionally replaced the Yuuzhan Vong in canon, but they fill the same narrative role. Although they don't come from another galaxy, they do emerge from the depths of the unknown regions, confirming it as an area to fear and avoid. In the novel Chiss Ascendancy series, the Grisk's impending threat is one of the main reasons why Thrawn decides to join the Empire. Their methods mirror those of the Yuuzhan Vong, although they're far more manipulative and sly. It remains to be seen how their storyline develops in the new canon, because they haven't been developed on screen yet, but they're a Chekhov's gun waiting to happen. However, their presence in the galaxy reinforces the overall paranoia about the unknown regions and why it remains unexplored. Once again, shout out to our sponsor War Thunder. Go out and fly a plane or shoot one down with a ship. It'll be just like Star Wars, but without the stars. Get it? Anyway, go use the links in the description or pinned comment and sign up today for the best vehicle combat game out there. New players and players who haven't played in 6 months will receive a massive bonus pack on PC and consoles. That includes multiple premium vehicles, the exclusive vehicle decorator Eagle of Valor, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium account. Available for a limited time only.